It was supposed to be a normal Sunday afternoon. You know, the kind, lazy, harmless, filled with leftovers, half-watched Netflix shows, and family pretending not to be on their phones at the dinner table. The kind of day that doesn't get remembered. That's what makes this story so haunting. Because that's when it all started. Innocently, casually, quietly. A single post. One smiling photo. A few dozen likes. But then one comment. Just one. And everything changed. Everything unraveled. If you've ever thought your life was normal, if you've ever trusted the memories you've grown up with, or looked at a family photo and believed it showed the whole truth, this story is going to make you question all of that. Listen, I know videos like this come with big titles and bold claims, and you're probably wondering if it's just another clickbait story. But let me make a deal with you. Stay with me until the end, and I promise you'll walk away with the answer you came for. The question is real. The mystery is real. And the reveal? It's not just shocking, it's life-altering. You're not going to want to scroll away or skip forward because every second builds up to something bigger. You might think you can predict what's coming, but trust me, no one does. That's what makes this story so powerful, so terrifying, and so unforgettable. Imagine being a teen who's just trying to live her life, balancing awkward high school moments, TikTok trends, and trying to keep up appearances online. That's Maddie. 17, smart, sarcastic, and honestly just like any other teen you'd pass by at Target or see lip-syncing to a trending sound on your For You page. She wasn't famous. She wasn't chasing clout. She was just being a teenager, posting a simple family photo on Instagram during a weekend trip. It was the kind of post that barely gets noticed, the kind with a caption like "Family Time Red Heart, #blessed." But someone did notice. Someone who saw what no one else did. And in the middle of the flood of "so cute" and "OMG your fam is goals," there was one comment that didn't fit. No emojis. No fluff. Just 6 chilling words. Why is he in the picture? At first, Maddie didn't even see it. It got buried between filters and likes. But once she read it, something inside her shifted. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Like the person knew something. Something they weren't supposed to know. Something she didn't even know. You ever get that drop in your stomach when something feels off but you can't explain why? That's what she felt. And that was just the beginning. Now, before we go any further, let me ask you something. What would you do if a stranger knew a secret about your family that you didn't? If they saw something in a picture you've seen 100 times, but never noticed? Would you brush it off? Block them? Or would you go looking for answers, even if those answers could destroy everything you thought you knew? Because that's exactly what Maddie did. And the deeper she dug, the more questions she found. Until eventually, she hit the truth and wished she hadn't. This video isn't just about a comment. It's about identity, memory, and the terrifying idea that someone close to you might not be who they say they are. It's about how the internet, while it connects us, can also open doors to things that were meant to stay buried. And if you think this couldn't happen to you, you might want to think again. These stories are real. The signs are subtle. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. We're going to unpack this entire story together. Every moment, every clue, every lie, and every shocking twist. You're not just watching this. You're in it now. So settle in, because what's coming next will make your jaw drop. We're talking digital breadcrumbs, hidden identities, and one teen's journey to uncover the secret her family never wanted her to find. And the most disturbing part? The truth was hiding in plain sight. All it took was a comment from a complete stranger to expose everything. By the end of this story, you're going to see the photo for yourself. You're going to read the comment. You're going to know what Maddie saw. But more than that, you're going to understand why this story went viral, why people are still talking about it, and why no one who watched this ever looked at their own family the same way again. Because what if the person in your own photos doesn't belong there? What if your favorite memory is a lie? Maddie had never been the kind of girl who chased attention. If anything, she preferred to stay just under the radar, present enough to be noticed in class group chats and occasional school events, but never the one starting drama or oversharing online. Her social media was modest, curated more out of habit than for validation. A few selfies here and there, some beach shots from last summer with her best friend Liv, and the occasional picture of her dog, Nala. Nothing flashy, nothing viral. But something about that one family photo felt different. It wasn't staged, not overly posed. Just a quick snapshot taken by a waiter during a last-minute dinner stop off the highway. Her mom had posted it to Facebook with a caption, "Unexpected road trip equals unexpected memories, red heart," and Maddie, not thinking much of it, reposted the same shot to her Instagram story, and later as a regular post, adding her own twist. "Family chaos, but make it aesthetic, face with tears of joy, #roadtripvibes, #famjam." She didn't expect it to get much traction. But when the notifications started piling up, likes, comments, DMs, it was clear something was off. The engagement wasn't normal. It wasn't even close. Over the past week, Maddie had been acting more private than usual. Liv had noticed first. They'd been best friends since 5th grade, and they shared everything: texts at 2 a.m., awkward crush confessions, TikToks before they went viral. But lately, Maddie was harder to reach. Short replies. Cancelled plans. And when they did talk, she seemed distracted, distant. Liv figured it was stress. College applications were looming. Maddie's parents had been fighting more than usual, and school wasn't exactly a walk in the park. But it wasn't just that. Something else had changed. Something unspoken. Maddie had always been curious about everything. She loved unsolved mysteries, true crime documentaries, Reddit rabbit holes, and those wild conspiracy videos on YouTube that start with top 10 creepiest things found on Google Maps. But now, her curiosity had a different edge to it. Sharper. More obsessive. Ever since that comment appeared, "Why is he in the picture?" Maddie couldn't stop analyzing the photo. At first, she thought maybe it was a troll. Someone trying to get attention. But the account that left the comment wasn't a bot or a fake profile. It belonged to a real person. Low follower count, old posts, nothing remarkable. Still, there was something unsettling about it. Their bio was blank. Their username random. But their profile picture, it looked vaguely familiar. Like someone she'd seen before, but couldn't place. She didn't respond to the comment at first. But after a day of it gnawing at her, she messaged the account, asking bluntly, "What do you mean by that comment?" No reply. Just a seen notification. Then silence. Until 2 days later, when a link arrived in her inbox without explanation. No context. No warning. Just a link. The website looked like it hadn't been updated in years. It was clunky, bare bones, like something built on an old forum platform. No branding. Just a headline that read, "Missing Persons Index. Unsolved Archive." Maddie scrolled, not really understanding what she was looking for, until she saw the photo. It hit her like a punch to the stomach. The man in the picture, the one labeled status, missing since 2006, looked exactly like the man standing next to her mom in their road trip photo. Same smile. Same dark eyes. Same small scar above the left eyebrow. Her brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe the photo was doctored. Or maybe her family was hiding something. Something huge. She didn't want to believe it. Her mom, Amy, was a 3rd-grade teacher who still packed handwritten notes in Maddie's lunch sometimes. Her stepdad, Dan, was the kind of guy who couldn't fix a leaky faucet but somehow owned 6 power tools. He'd been in her life since she was 8. She didn't even call him Step, he was just Dad. Always had been. There was no part of her that ever questioned who he was. Until now. Because if that man in the photo really was the same man listed as missing nearly 20 years ago, then who was Dan really? Things started unraveling fast after that. Maddie became consumed by the idea that something wasn't right. She began digging through old family albums, scrolling back through years of photos, trying to find any inconsistencies. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before, like how there were barely any pictures of Dan from before she was 10. Or how he always dodged questions about his childhood. She remembered how he hated getting his picture taken, and once made a big deal about not being tagged in a Christmas photo on Facebook. She'd never questioned it. Some people just valued privacy. But now it felt like something more. She couldn't tell Liv. Not yet. She didn't want to sound crazy. And besides, if she was wrong, She'd be blowing up her entire family dynamic over a comment from a stranger. But what if she wasn't wrong? What if this wasn't just about an old photo, or even just about her stepdad? What if there was something deeper, something more dangerous? The more she searched, the more she noticed weird patterns. There was a man who had once shown up at her school, asking questions about student pickups, who then vanished when security came. There were credit card charges from cities they'd never visited. Her mom once burned a box of papers in the backyard, claiming it was just old junk from the attic. Maddie was beginning to think it wasn't junk at all. As she followed more leads, more things started to feel out of place. She even started doubting her own memories. She remembered a road trip to Arizona when she was 9, but then found a picture of herself at Disney that same week. She remembered Dan teaching her how to ride a bike, but couldn't find a single photo of it, not even one her mom had taken. Little gaps. Holes in the timeline. Like parts of her life had been edited, overwritten. The more she questioned, the less she trusted. Not just her parents, but her own mind. Still, Maddie couldn't be sure who the threat was. Was it Dan? Was it the stranger who sent the link? Was her mom involved, or in danger herself? Could the commenter have been a detective? A relative of someone who disappeared? Or someone playing a twisted game online? Every theory led to another dead end, another contradiction. And yet, they all felt possible. That's when Maddie started keeping notes. A journal, a map of timelines, clues, inconsistencies, anything she could find. She kept it hidden in a Google Drive folder, labeling it under a fake homework assignment just in case. But the real turning point came when someone slipped a note into her locker. No name, no handwriting she recognized. Just a folded piece of notebook paper that said, "Don't ask questions you aren't ready to answer." At that moment, Maddie realized this wasn't just a family mystery. It was a web, something bigger. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what she was doing. And if they were willing to threaten her anonymously at school, what else were they capable of? The story you're watching right now, this isn't just about curiosity gone too far. It's about what happens when the past refuses to stay buried. When a simple photo can unlock secrets meant to stay hidden forever. When people aren't who they claim to be. And when the truth comes knocking, loud enough to shatter everything you thought was safe. But just when Maddie thought she had her list of suspects, just when she thought she'd narrowed it down to a few possibilities, she stumbled across something that flipped the entire narrative upside down. A hidden file in an old laptop. A name that didn't match. And a face she thought she'd never see again. Maddie couldn't sleep. Not really. Every night, she'd lay in bed with the lights off and her phone in her hand, brightness dimmed, scrolling through the same grainy screenshots she'd saved from the missing persons archive. She'd stare at the face that matched her stepdad's, trying to find something, anything, to prove her theory wrong. But the resemblance was undeniable. The photo might have been taken years ago, but the eyes were the same. And once she noticed that, everything around her felt off. Like the walls in her own home had started whispering secrets. And the worst part? She had no one she could talk to. She was trapped inside her own head, trying to act normal at school, at dinner, even while watching TV with Dan on the couch, like they hadn't just potentially unlocked a decades-old cold case with a single photo. But the deeper she went, the harder the search became. First, the link to the missing persons archive stopped working. Just gone. When she tried to refresh the page, she got a 404 error. When she checked her messages, the original account that had sent the link had been deleted. No trace. No evidence. Like it never existed. She even tried screen recording her activity to show Liv later, but the video file glitched and corrupted. That alone freaked her out. She knew how her phone worked. Files didn't just disappear or break without warning. It felt targeted, deliberate. Like someone was erasing her tracks just as fast as she could find them. Still, she wasn't ready to back down. She started digging into public databases, online news articles, old message boards. At one point, she signed up for a free trial of a background check website, hoping to search Dan's name, but she hit a wall. There was no record of him before 2011. No credit history, no job listings, not even an address. According to the internet, Dan, the man who'd been in her life for almost 10 years, just appeared out of nowhere. She started thinking about the past differently. Her mom met Dan through a friend of a friend, but Maddie could never remember who that friend was. She used to think it didn't matter. Now it felt like it was the missing puzzle piece that could unlock everything. Then something even stranger happened. Maddie had a laptop she rarely used, an old hand-me-down from her cousin that mostly sat under her bed collecting dust. One night, she powered it on just to search without being tracked. She figured, maybe if her regular devices were compromised, this one might give her a clean slate. While poking around, she found a folder tucked deep in the system files with a name that made no sense. cache_old_docs_7A2. It was password protected. She didn't remember ever creating it. And when she finally cracked the password, an old family nickname from when she was a kid, what she saw made her blood run cold. There were documents. Scanned copies of old driver's licenses. One with Dan's face, but a different name. There were IDs from multiple states. Notes written in strange shorthand. A photo of Dan standing with two people she didn't recognize, smiling like they were family. And then, at the bottom of the folder, there was a short video clip. Grainy. Old. But clearly showing Dan, or whoever he really was, walking into a motel room with a bag and locking the door behind him. The file was timestamped, April 2006. The same month the man from the missing persons database had vanished. Maddie knew she couldn't keep this to herself anymore. She called Liv and told her everything. Every terrifying detail. At first, Liv thought it was a prank. But when Maddie showed her the photo comparison, the fake IDs, the video, Liv went silent. Then she said something that gave Maddie chills. You have to stop. This isn't just weird anymore. It's dangerous. That's when Maddie noticed something strange in Liv's voice. Not fear, hesitation. Like she was holding something back. The next day, Liv didn't show up to school. No text. No response. Nothing. When Maddie went to her house, Liv's mom said she'd gone to visit her aunt last minute. Which was weird. Liv hated that aunt. Something wasn't adding up. And that night, Maddie got a text from an unknown number. No name. No greeting. Just, you're going too far. People disappear for less. It made her stomach drop. She started to feel watched. Her phone battery would drain faster than usual. Her search history would reset overnight. Her bedroom door, which always creaked when opened, suddenly made no noise one morning, almost like someone had been in there while she slept. She wanted to believe it was all in her head. But when she went back to that old laptop the next day, the entire folder was gone. Not in the trash. Not recoverable. Erased. Cleaned. Like it had never been there. But the worst moment came 2 days later. Maddie was going through an old scrapbook her mom kept in the hallway closet. It was dusty, untouched for years. Inside were baby pictures, birthday cards, drawings she made in kindergarten. And then, tucked in the back behind a glued-down page, was something she wasn't supposed to find, a letter addressed to her mom from someone named E. Caldwell. The letter talked about a child custody dispute, a hidden identity, and a plan to start over in a new state. There were no details, but the date matched the same year Dan entered their lives. And the signature, it didn't match anyone Maddie had ever heard of before. As she read the letter for a second time, she heard the front door open downstairs. It was Dan. But he wasn't alone. A man's voice followed. A voice she didn't recognize.
Come.
Controlled. And then she heard her name. Her heart froze. The letter shook in her hand. She shoved it back in the scrapbook and ran to her room, quietly locking the door. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone to call Liv, but the line rang twice, then cut to voicemail. Then came a soft knock on her door. Not Dan's usual knock.
Slower.
Deliberate. And then the voice, Maddie, we need to talk. But when she asked who it was, the person on the other side didn't answer. Maddie didn't open the door. She stood frozen, holding her breath as the knock was followed by a long silence. Then soft footsteps retreated down the hallway. The voices downstairs grew faint, like they were deliberately lowering their volume just enough so she couldn't hear what they were saying, but not enough to hide the fact that they were talking about her. She backed away from the door and looked at her phone again. No new messages. Still no word from Liv. That silence was louder than any knock. Maddie's thoughts swirled. What if Liv hadn't just gone out of town? What if she'd been silenced too? And that letter from Eve Caldwell, who was that? A lawyer? A relative? Someone from Dan's past? Whoever they were, they knew enough to write about custody and identity like it was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Nothing in her life felt real anymore. Her house, her parents, her memories, it all felt like a set built on lies. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, another twist surfaced in the most unexpected place. Her cousin Jake, who lived in Colorado and barely kept in touch outside of holidays, messaged her out of the blue. The message was short, but it hit like a lightning bolt. Hey, random Q, did your mom ever date someone named Eric Caldwell? I think he tried to add me on Facebook. Maddie's stomach turned. That name again. She hadn't even told Jake what was going on, yet here it was, Caldwell, reappearing from the shadows like a ghost. She immediately called him. Jake, ever the laid-back type, was more confused than worried. He said he got a friend request from someone using an old profile picture, no mutual friends, just the name Eric Caldwell and a blank timeline. But what really made him curious was that the guy messaged him directly, asking if he was still close to the Roberts family. Jake had no clue what that meant. The Roberts family? That was Maddie's last name. The idea that this person, whoever Eric Caldwell really was now reaching out to extended family sent panic shooting through her chest. This wasn't just about her household anymore. Someone was making moves behind the scenes, methodically reaching out to people connected to her life. That meant someone was watching. Someone knew her family tree, her friends, her cousins. It wasn't random. It was targeted. Maddie begged Jake not to accept the request or respond further. He agreed, though he sounded more intrigued than cautious. If you find out what this is about, you better fill me in, he said before hanging up. She wasn't sure if she ever would. As she sat in her room trying to process this new angle, her mom knocked on her door. It was different than before, gentle, like she wasn't sure she'd be welcomed in. Maddie hesitated, then cracked the door open. Amy stood there holding a cup of tea and a concerned expression. You okay, sweetheart? She asked. Maddie wanted to scream no, I'm not okay, but instead nodded. Just tired, she said. Her mom looked at her for a second longer than normal, like she knew something wasn't right but couldn't bring herself to say it. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? Amy added. Maddie didn't answer. She just took the tea and shut the door slowly. But that night, she couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, the Roberts family. That wasn't how people usually referred to them. Her mom's last name was still different on most documents. Maddie had only used Roberts on her social media and school records. So how did this Caldwell person even know to phrase it like that? Unless he knew more about them than he should. She decided to log into her mom's Facebook account. Amy used the same few passwords for everything, and it only took 2 tries. Maddie didn't feel good about snooping, but something in her gut told her she had to. Hats, when she found a series of archived messages. Years old. Hidden in a folder labeled Other. The messages were from a user with a handle, EC_inbound79. The first few were friendly, even flirty. But then, the tone shifted. There were threats, demands, accusations. You promised me she wouldn't remember. I stayed away like you asked. But now I want my part. If you keep ignoring me, I'll come back myself. Maddie felt her knees weaken. The messages were all directed at her mom. They dated back to around 2013, 2 years after Dan moved in. But Dan's name was never mentioned. It was always you and her, like Caldwell was talking in code about someone watching from the outside. Someone who had been cut out. But the scariest message wasn't a threat. It was a single line that made her entire world tilt sideways. You told me she wasn't mine. Maddie slammed the laptop shut, her heart pounding. What did that even mean? Was he talking about her? Was there a possibility that this entire mystery wasn't about her stepdad hiding who he was, but about her mom hiding something just as big? A whole new question opened up like a trapdoor beneath her. What if both of them were lying? The next morning, she went to school looking for Liv, hoping maybe she'd show up and break this terrible silence. But instead, she found a sealed envelope in her locker. No name, just the number 11 written on the front in red ink. Inside was a blurry photograph of a girl who looked like her, but younger, maybe 4 or 5 years old. She was standing in front of a building Maddie didn't recognize. The girl wore a pink jacket Maddie vaguely remembered owning, and behind her stood 2 adults with their backs turned. One looked like her mom. The other she couldn't quite tell. The photo looked like it was taken with a zoom lens, like someone had been spying from across the street. Written on the back of the photo was just one line. "You forgot where you came from." But I didn't. Maddie stood there, frozen in the hallway, the noise of lockers slamming and students laughing fading into the background like static. It didn't make sense, yet at the same time, it did. Someone out there didn't just know her history. They remembered parts of it better than she did. This wasn't just about her stepdad's identity. This wasn't just about Eric Caldwell or missing persons records. It was about something that went all the way back to her earliest childhood, before she could even understand what was happening. Someone had been watching her for years. Someone who believed she didn't belong where she was now. Someone who might believe she was stolen. But the most terrifying part? She was starting to wonder if they were right. The change came quietly, but its impact was immediate, like the air before a tornado, still, heavy, and choking with something invisible yet undeniable. That night, after finding the photograph in her locker, Maddie barely spoke a word. She didn't eat dinner, and when Dan asked how her day was, she just nodded and muttered something generic about math homework. Her mom looked over at her a few times with eyes that were too wide, too polite, like she was trying to read Maddie without pushing her. But Maddie knew. They knew something was wrong. What terrified her more was that they didn't ask. That silence screamed louder than any confrontation. She pretended to go to bed early and lay there in the dark, her eyes open and locked on the ceiling, pulse echoing in her ears. Her mind raced through questions that had no logical end. Was she in danger from someone outside the house, or was the real threat already inside it? The next day, everything shattered. When she got to school, her first instinct was to find a teacher, someone she trusted, but before she could even make it to first period, the loudspeaker crackled to life with an announcement that made her heart plummet. "Students, please remain calm. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are initiating a controlled lockdown. This is not a drill." There was a beat of silence that followed, where the usual noise of the halls drained away into dead air. Maddie stood frozen in place as classroom doors slammed shut one by one. She ducked into a bathroom and locked herself in a stall, her phone buzzing in her hoodie pocket. It was a message from an unknown number again. Only this time, there were no words. Just a photo. It was a screenshot of her walking to school that morning. It had clearly been taken from a distance, maybe from a car. Zoomed in. Framed to show her, alone, unaware. At the bottom of the image, in bold red letters, "I see you." She dropped the phone. Her breath hitched. Her thoughts blurred. This wasn't some online troll anymore. Someone was physically close. Someone who had watched her, tracked her steps, and now, for the first time, made it clear they weren't just trying to rattle her. They were trying to corner her. She stayed locked in the stall for what felt like hours, listening to distant footsteps and hushed voices through the tiled walls. The lockdown eventually ended with no real explanation. A security concern, the principal said over the intercom, something about an unverified threat, but no one was harmed, nothing was confirmed. But Maddie knew. This was for her. Someone had used the lockdown to send her a message. They could reach her, even in the safest place she thought she had left. When she got home, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Her mom's car was gone, but Dan's was still in the driveway. She stepped inside cautiously, calling out a soft hello that echoed down the hallway unanswered. There were no lights on, no TV, no music playing in the kitchen like usual, just that heavy, unnatural silence again. She crept upstairs, phone clutched in her hand like it could save her, and pushed her mom's door open. Empty. The bed was made, the lamp off. She checked the living room. Nothing. Kitchen, clean, untouched. She moved toward the garage, something gnawing at the edge of her thoughts, and slowly opened the door leading out. Her mom's car wasn't there. But that wasn't the only thing missing. Her mom's emergency go bag, the one she always kept, just in case of wildfires or earthquakes, was gone. The drawer where she kept her passport and important documents was open and empty. Maddie stood there staring at it, her mouth dry, stomach churning. This wasn't normal. Her mom hadn't just run an errand. She had left. And she hadn't told Maddie anything. Panicking, she tried calling. Straight to voicemail. She checked her location on Find My iPhone. It was turned off. She tried her work office, then her friends. No one had seen or heard from her since yesterday. She was just gone. That absence hit harder than she expected. For all the suspicion Maddie had harbored toward her mom lately, part of her had clung to the hope that Amy was trying to protect her, that there was still something maternal underneath all the secrets.
But now?
The silence said otherwise. She didn't get to dwell on it long. As she went back upstairs, trying to figure out what to do next, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Her bedroom window was slightly open. She never left it open. And sitting on her pillow, perfectly placed and impossible to miss, was a key. Just one, worn, old-looking, with the number 82 scratched into its head. She didn't know what it unlocked, but she knew exactly what it meant. Someone had been in her room. While she was at school, they had gotten inside, bypassed the locks, and left a clue, or a challenge. Or maybe a countdown. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her hands trembled as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at that key. What if it wasn't just her mom who disappeared? What if she was next? What if this was all part of something deeper, something that stretched further back than she ever imagined? She thought about that message from Eric Caldwell. About Dan's fake identity. About the photograph of her as a little girl, standing in front of strangers. About the whispers in her house that only she could hear. She reached for her phone again to call Jake, maybe the only person left she could trust. But before she could dial, a notification popped up. It was another image. This time, it was a close-up of that same old photograph, the one from her locker, but zoomed in on the adult standing beside the woman who looked like her mom. The man had turned slightly in this version, just enough to make out part of his face. Maddie stared at it, breath caught in her chest. It wasn't Dan. And it wasn't Eric Caldwell either. It was someone else. Someone she had never seen before in her life. And yet somehow, he looked just like her. Maddie couldn't sleep. Not that night. Not with the key still sitting on her desk like it was daring her to pick it up again. She kept checking the window, making sure it was locked, double-locked, even wedging a chair beneath the handle like she'd seen in old movies. Every creak in the house made her chest tighten. Every shadow felt like it was watching. She stayed up until just before sunrise, scrolling endlessly through every corner of the internet. News archives, missing persons databases, genealogy forums, anything that might explain the photo or the man in it. But nothing came close. And just when she was about to give up, her phone buzzed again, not with another threat or anonymous photo. This time it was Jake. His voice was low and shaky when she answered. Maddie, you need to get on your laptop. I found something. She didn't even question him. Within seconds, they were screen sharing as he walked her through what he discovered. He'd been digging around the Facebook profile of that Eric Caldwell account, despite her warning not to engage. Jake had used a fake burner account to message the guy back, just casually asking how he knew the Roberts family. The response was almost immediate. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't cryptic. It was a file. Jake opened it while she watched. It was a scanned birth certificate. Not hers, at least, not at first glance. It was dated a full year before the one she had seen growing up. The name listed was Madeline A. Caldwell. The parents? Amy Roberts. And Eric Caldwell. Maddie's mouth went dry. Her hands went ice cold. Jake just stared at the screen and whispered, Maddie, I think you were adopted, but no one ever told you. She shook her head, trying to wrap her brain around it. That doesn't make sense, she whispered. Why would my mom keep that from me? Why change my name? Why hide everything? Jake didn't have the answers. But the twist made everything else click into place. The lawyer's letter, her mom disappearing, the threats, the surveillance. Someone had been trying to reclaim her, but not as a stranger or stalker. As family. Suddenly, the story wasn't about someone targeting her. It was about someone trying to bring her back to a past she had no memory of. But that wasn't the end of the shock. There was more. Jake then hesitated. "There's another part," he said quietly. "I reverse-searched the photo of the man in the picture, and I found a local article. From 17 years ago. He wasn't just anyone." He pulled it up on his screen. It was a newspaper clipping from a small town in Oregon. The headline read, "Local doctor cleared of all charges after infant goes missing." Below it was a picture.
Same man.
Same haunted eyes. The article talked about a high-profile case involving a custody battle, a botched hospital discharge, and a missing infant who was never recovered. It mentioned the child's mother as Amy Roberts, who had filed the missing persons report, only to withdraw it 6 months later, citing a resolution in the family. Maddie's skin crawled. This wasn't just some twisted identity game. This was a cover-up. And not a recent one. Her entire life had been built around a lie that both her parents, if she could even call them that anymore, had agreed to keep buried. She wasn't just a girl caught in a mystery. She was the mystery. The thing everyone had been fighting over behind closed doors. Just then a knock hit her door. Not the front door. Her bedroom door. She turned, heart in her throat. "Mads? It's me." It was Dan. She hadn't seen him since the previous morning. His voice was soft, but it wasn't casual. It was deliberate, cautious, like he was walking on a minefield. She didn't move, just stared at the door. "I know you have questions," he continued. "I need you to listen to me before you do anything stupid." Her heart pounded louder than her thoughts. She didn't want to hear him, but she had to. She opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked pale, tired, almost as terrified as she felt. He sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. "There are things your mom didn't want me to tell you," he said slowly. "Things she thought you weren't ready for. Maybe she was right. But after she left, I knew it was only a matter of time." Maddie clenched her fists. "Time for what?" He looked up at her, eyes raw. "For you to remember who you really are." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then he dropped the final bomb. "Your mom wasn't the one who raised you as a baby. She took you from your biological father. She told me it was a private custody matter, but that wasn't the full truth. She disappeared with you, changed your name, moved states. And I helped her cover it up. I didn't know the details at first, but once I did, I couldn't undo it." Maddie staggered back. "You're saying she kidnapped me?" Dan nodded slowly. It wasn't the kind of case that got attention because she played it smart. She had people in her corner. She made it legal enough to survive the system. But that man in the photo? That's the one person who never stopped looking for you. And now he's found you. Her whole world crumbled in that moment. Not just shaken, demolished. The loving memories of her childhood suddenly felt tainted, like pieces of a dream that had never belonged to her in the first place. All the birthdays, the family dinners, the bedtime stories, they had been built on someone else's pain. A life stolen, rewritten, buried. And the worst part, Dan looked at her, eyes filled with a kind of guilt that couldn't be faked. "They're coming, Maddie," he said softly. "And I don't know if we can stop them this time." Maddie felt like she was suspended between two versions of her life. One where she was a normal teen who went to school, scrolled TikTok before bed, and worried about grades or prom or maybe heartbreak, and another where she was the centerpiece of a decades-long lie wrapped in custody disputes, identity theft, and shadows she couldn't even name yet. And now, with Dan sitting across from her, staring into her with the weight of a man who had been waiting years for this moment to arrive, that line between the two versions of her life had finally collapsed. The room didn't feel like hers anymore. Nothing did. Her hands trembled as she picked up the key again, the metal suddenly feeling heavier, more dangerous, like it wasn't just meant to unlock a door, but to pull back the last layer of truth they'd all been trying so hard to hide. Dan's eyes followed her movements carefully. "You need to understand," he said, almost pleading. "Your mom thought she was protecting you. She thought the man she ran from wasn't safe. He wasn't stable. She swore that if the courts got involved, he'd find a way to take you and disappear forever. She was scared, and I believed her. His voice cracked slightly. But maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have asked more questions instead of helping her wipe everything clean. Maddie stared at him, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes, but every word he spoke only dragged her deeper into the fog. Because now she didn't know who to believe. Her mother, who was gone without a trace, or this man who raised her, who knew the truth and said nothing. The betrayal settled into her chest like smoke, thick and choking. She wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers from someone, anyone, but all she had were broken pieces and 1,000 versions of the same question. Who am I really, and why did they all lie? Just then, her phone lit up again. Another message from the unknown number. This time, it wasn't a threat or a photo. It was a video. She tapped it, and the screen filled with grainy footage that made her heart lurch. It was surveillance camera footage, dated 2 days ago. It showed her mom, Amy, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, walking briskly through a train station. She looked over her shoulder twice before stepping into a restroom and vanishing from the frame. But just before the video cut off, another figure appeared, tall, older, with a long coat and a baseball cap pulled low. The man from the photograph. Her biological father. The caption underneath the video simply said, "She's running again. This time, it's from you." Dan saw the video too, and the look on his face confirmed it. He had no idea Amy was even still in the country. Whatever she was hiding, she had hidden it from everyone. And now, whoever had sent that message wasn't just tracking Maddie. They were tracking her mom, too. This wasn't over. It was only getting deeper. That night, a letter arrived in the mailbox. No postage, no return address. Just her name, written in careful block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one line written in bold black ink. "You can meet him, but not both of you." Attached was a map and a time. 9 p.m. One car. Come alone. Maddie didn't tell Dan about the letter. She stared at it for hours, heart pounding, thoughts racing. This wasn't just a chance to uncover the truth. It was a decision that could change everything. She could go and finally meet the man claiming to be her real father, the man who had haunted the corners of her life in silence. But doing so meant betraying the man who had raised her, the one who, even through the lies, had tucked her in at night and taught her how to ride a bike. It meant risking everything she'd known in exchange for the possibility that everything had been built on someone else's suffering. It meant choosing between the life she had and the life that had been stolen from her before she ever had a say in it. As the sun set and the time on the clock inched closer to 9, she stood at the edge of her decision, feeling the weight of it pressed down on her shoulders. She didn't know what she was walking into. A reunion? A trap? A goodbye? All she knew was that the person who held the answers wasn't going to wait forever, and whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes had just made the game deadly serious. She took the key, slid it into her jacket pocket, and walked out the front door without saying a word. Behind her, the light in Dan's office flicked off. Somewhere in the dark, another figure watched her leave. And somewhere deeper, far beneath everything she thought she knew, a final truth waited, one that none of them were ready for. The night was colder than it should have been, like the air itself was warning her to turn back. But Maddie didn't. She followed the map through winding back roads and into a stretch of forest on the edge of town where cell service dropped and even the moonlight felt hesitant to reach. The road ended near an abandoned ranger station, boards nailed across shattered windows, nature slowly reclaiming the building as its own. Her headlights flickered as she parked, her stomach twisting with every minute closer to 9. The silence outside was absolute, almost rehearsed. She clutched the letter in one hand, the key in the other, and stepped out, every sound amplified in her ears. The crunch of her sneakers on gravel, the faint rustle of leaves in the wind, the pulse pounding behind her ribs. She approached the building slowly. No sign of life. No movement. Just that kind of stillness that makes you second-guess your sanity. And then, from the shadows, a voice. I didn't think you'd come alone. She turned, heart slamming against her chest. It was him. The man from the photo. The man from the news article. The man whose eyes were now identical to hers up close. Same color, same intensity, same deep sadness that said more than words ever could. I don't even know who you are, she whispered. He nodded, stepping closer. That's not your fault. It never was.
She didn't know what to say.
Her breath caught somewhere between fear and fury. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, more people began to emerge. 2 men, a woman with a clipboard and a younger guy holding a walkie. None of them looked like strangers. They looked like professionals. Coordinated. Too coordinated. And that's when Maddie realized this wasn't a meeting. It was a briefing. She wasn't just discovering her past. She had walked into the heart of something far bigger than she'd imagined. We've been watching for a long time, the man continued. Your mother made it very hard. Changed names, moved states, scrubbed records. She had help. The words hit like a hammer. She had help. Maddie felt her legs go weak. Help from who? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he motioned for one of the others to hand her a folder. Inside were documents, photographs, time-stamped communications, many marked confidential. She flipped through them, each page dragging her deeper into a reality she hadn't known existed. There were surveillance photos of her house taken over years, school records, medical files, an official custody order that had been filed but never enforced, and at the bottom, email printouts. She stopped cold. They were from Dan. Sent years ago. Coded, vague, but unmistakably referencing the girl, containment, and long-term care. No, she muttered, stepping back. He would never. I thought that too, the man said. But your stepfather was paid to keep tabs on you. Your mom negotiated his cooperation when she disappeared. He was supposed to alert us the moment something shifted. If she resurfaced, if you asked questions, if you got too close. And he did. Her mind reeled. Everything blurred. The man who raised her, who said he loved her, who claimed he didn't know anything, he knew everything. He had been playing both sides the entire time. Maybe even more than 2. Was he protecting her or managing her? The older man kept speaking, but it felt like background noise now. Words like program, recovery, biological asset, custodial redaction. None of it made sense. It felt clinical, cold, disconnected from the emotions ripping through her chest. She wasn't just a girl caught in a lie. She was part of some orchestrated system designed to keep her where they wanted her. She had never been free. Not really. And then, the final blow. They played her a recording. It was her mom's voice. I did what I had to. They don't understand what she is, what she knows. If they find her, they'll use her. Like they used me. Maddie stumbled back, nausea rising in her throat. What she knows. What did that even mean? She didn't know anything, at least not consciously. But now it was clear, this wasn't about love or custody or even identity. It was about access. She wasn't a missing girl. She was a locked vault, and every adult in her life had been circling, waiting for the combination to finally click. And the key in her pocket? Maybe it wasn't to a safe deposit box or an old house. Maybe it was to her. Suddenly, lights flashed through the trees, headlights. A car sped toward them. Doors flung open. It was Dan. He was shouting her name. Desperate. Frantic. But not with the guilt of a man caught. With the rage of someone who had just realized he'd been double-crossed too. Maddie turned to the man beside her. You said he was part of this. The man frowned. He was. Until last week. Everything spun. Who was lying now? Who wasn't? The younger guy with the walkie spoke into his mic. We've got incoming. Multiple vehicles. Possible breach. They weren't supposed to be here yet. The man grabbed Maddie's arm. We need to go. No, she said, backing away. No one tells me what to do anymore. Behind her, Dan was running through the trees. Around her, the others were preparing to evacuate. In her pocket, the key burned hot. And inside her, something finally cracked open. Not fear, not confusion, but clarity. Whatever truth they were hiding wasn't just about her family, it was bigger.
Deeper.
A secret so dangerous they'd all been willing to lie, manipulate, and betray to protect it. And now, everyone was coming to claim it. The forest erupted into chaos. Sirens in the distance, radios crackling, tires skidding over gravel. Maddie stood in the center of it all, the storm eye of a decade-long conspiracy that had spiraled far beyond her family photo. Dan broke through the tree line, panic painted across his face, but it was a panic different than fear. It was regret, anguish. He called her name, but Maddie didn't move. She watched as the man who raised her clashed with the man who claimed to be her real father, both now standing mere feet apart, guarded by different truths and equally dangerous secrets. Behind them, the group that had orchestrated so much, the handlers, the watchers, the ones who had monitored her every move, were packing up files and clearing digital trails, prepared to vanish the moment things tipped out of their control. But it was already too late. This wasn't just about Maddie anymore. It was about all of them, and the fact that the truth they buried had finally clawed its way back to the surface. She pulled the key from her jacket pocket. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was the final card in a game that had been rigged from the start. Her voice didn't waver when she spoke, even though her body trembled. "Tell me what this opens."
Now.
The older man, her alleged biological father, stepped forward, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "It's not a key to a lock. It's a key to a memory." Maddie blinked, stunned. "What?" He explained quickly, urgently, like they were running out of time. "When you were 4, there was an incident. You saw something you weren't supposed to see. We couldn't erase it, so we suppressed it. That key belonged to a safe containing the only video footage from that night, along with a report from your mother, who helped orchestrate the cover-up." The ground felt like it was shifting beneath her. "You're saying I already know the truth?" He nodded. "You always have." Dan stepped between them now, jaw clenched, shaking his head. "Don't listen to him, Maddie. He's manipulating you. The footage, it's been doctored. It doesn't show what really happened." But Maddie could see it now, how Dan's hands trembled, how his voice cracked with something other than concern. He was unraveling. She'd spent weeks thinking he was her rock, then her captor, then her victim.
But now?
Now she realized he had been all three, and he was finally out of masks. "Show me the footage," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The man nodded to the younger agent, who pulled a drive from his coat pocket and slid it into a tablet. The screen flickered, then came alive with static, then with an image that made Maddie's entire world tilt. It was her, barely older than a toddler, sitting in a room filled with monitors. On one of the screens in front of her was live footage from a hospital. Doctors panicked, alarms blaring, a patient flatlining. Her mother stood in the corner of the frame, arguing with a group of officials, pleading for them to shut the program down. The words echoed faintly, distorted by the recording, but one line broke through with clarity. "She's not just remembering the past. She's predicting it." Maddie's breath caught. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. That wasn't a hospital accident she saw as a child. It was a future she had somehow foreseen, a catastrophe that hadn't yet happened at the time the video was recorded. That's why they buried it. That's why they suppressed her memories. She wasn't just some lost kid in a custody battle. She was part of a classified neurological study her mother tried to stop. A study that proved one terrifying truth: Maddie had glimpses of the future. And someone, somewhere, wanted that power controlled. The video ended, and silence fell like a guillotine. The agents stood frozen. Dan stared at the ground. The man beside her, the one who claimed to be her real father, just looked broken. She turned to Dan, her voice sharp now. "You knew." He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "They said if we let it unfold naturally, it would burn you out. You were having seizures, losing time. They convinced your mom to walk away from it, to raise you like nothing ever happened. But she couldn't stop seeing what you saw. And when she tried to blow the whistle, they came after her." "Who's they?" Maddie pressed. A pause. Dan looked at her. "Not a person. A network." People in every agency you can name, but operating under something deeper. Think tanks, contractors, quiet labs in places not even on Google Maps. They called it Project Blackhole. The agent stiffened at the name. So did the man next to her. No one had said that word out loud in years. And that's when Maddie made her decision. She stepped toward the agents and handed over the key. Unlock the safe. All of it. Show the world. A commotion erupted. The younger agent protested. Dan lunged forward to stop her, but the older man held him back. She deserves to choose, he said. For once. And then, one last voice joined the chaos. A voice from the trees, calm and composed. She already did. Everyone turned. It was her mother. Amy stepped out of the shadows, alive, visibly shaken but resolute. She held a burner phone in one hand and something else in the other, a recording device. I never stopped running, she said, eyes fixed on Maddie. But I never stopped watching either. The room fell to pieces. Amy handed Maddie the original memory file, the one unedited and censored, containing the final piece of the puzzle. It not only confirmed Maddie's gift but also exposed a shadow group within the defense community who had been harvesting predictive abilities from children across the globe for over a decade, buried under medical trials, hidden under NDAs, passed off as psychological research. Dan had been their handler. The man beside her had once tried to expose them before vanishing. And Maddie? She had been the prototype they feared would become impossible to control. Before anyone could stop her, Maddie uploaded the full files from the safe to the cloud. Encrypted, mirrored, sent to dozens of journalists, whistleblower servers, even live-streamed briefly on TikTok with a hashtag that had first sparked her journey. Hashtag truth in the photo. The agents scattered. Dan was arrested on site, not just for his involvement, but for attempting to destroy evidence earlier that day. Her real father walked away in silence, too broken to face what he had enabled. And Maddie? She stood with her mother in the clearing, holding a drive that had changed the world. But just as the last siren faded, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You exposed Blackhole.
Good.
Now run. There's more. And just like that, the story she thought had ended began again. Back home, the walls felt unfamiliar, like a stage after the show had ended. The photo that started it all, once pinned to the refrigerator like any ordinary memory, was now encased in a file under federal lock and digital scrutiny. But Maddie didn't look at it the same way anymore. Every smile in that image, every blurred background figure, carried weight. Her life hadn't just been photographed. It had been recorded, analyzed, repurposed. Yet for the first time in weeks, she wasn't searching the corners of rooms or listening for footsteps behind her. The weight of what she had uncovered still lingered, but so did something else, a quiet clarity. She now knew who she was, not just a teenage girl caught in a digital whirlwind, but someone whose instincts were right all along. The secrets buried beneath her past had been real. The betrayal had been real. And more importantly, so had the love that tried to protect her from it. Amy sat beside her on the back porch, holding a warm mug and staring into the yard like it was the first time she'd allowed herself to exhale in years. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore, it was earned. Maddie turned to her mom, the same woman who once vanished without a trace and now sat at her side as if she'd never left. They didn't need to unpack everything all at once.
Not yet.
There was too much to process, too many emotions still tangled. But there was a peace in knowing the worst was behind them, or at least that they had survived it. The memory key, the encrypted drive, Project Blackhole, all of it was now in the hands of multiple investigative agencies, journalists, and advocacy groups demanding congressional hearings. TikTok, ironically, had played a massive role. Her original post, with a simple family picture and that mysterious comment, had sparked a firestorm of trending hashtags like #MemoryLeak, #HiddenInPlainSight, and #TruthInThePhoto. For days, it dominated For You pages across the country. Influencers broke it down. True crime channels dissected it. And everyday people asked the same haunting question: how many other children were like her? The investigation widened. Old government programs, long buried under budget sheets and non-disclosure agreements, were being reopened. Testimonies from other families began to surface. Mothers who remembered their kids describing things before they happened, schools that quietly transferred students after unexplained behavioral shifts, doctors who once received grants and then were told to disappear. What started as a teenage girl's family drama had unearthed something systemic. And yet, Maddie didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to be Maddie again. Not a trend. Not a file. Not a prototype. Just a person. Her relationship with Dan remained fractured, and it likely always would be. He wasn't in prison yet. He was under surveillance, and the courts would determine how deep his involvement truly went. Whether he had ever cared for her or just played the part didn't matter anymore. The betrayal hurt, but Maddie refused to let it define her. The real healing came not from answers, but from knowing that some questions were worth asking, even if they broke everything. Especially if they broke everything. School resumed weeks later, and though whispers followed her through the halls, she carried herself differently. Not defensive. Not haunted. Just alert. Grounded. When people stared, she stared back, not in challenge but in understanding. After all, she knew now that everyone carries secrets. Some hide them better than others. Some bury them so deep they forget they're even there. But eventually, truth has a way of surfacing. Maybe not through a photo. Maybe not through a comment. But always, in some form, it finds light. Late one night, as the news cycle began to move on and newer scandals filled social feeds, Maddie stood at her window, looking at the stars like she had as a kid. That's when her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another cryptic message. You stopped Blackhall. But not everything was archived. Look closer. She stared at the screen, heart still. A choice lay ahead: keep digging or finally walk away. For the first time, she considered the latter. She didn't need to solve everything. Maybe closure wasn't about answers, but the strength to live with the questions. But then, something shifted in her chest. Not fear, not dread, but curiosity. The same instinct that started it all. She looked at her phone again and didn't delete the message. Because sometimes, the real story doesn't end when the villain falls. It ends when the hero decides what kind of life they want next. And somewhere in that choice, a new mystery waits. Maybe that's what truth really is, not a destination, but a trail of moments hidden in the ordinary, waiting for someone brave enough to follow.